Welcome, everyone, and good morning. I'm so glad you could all join us today as we launch our second annual Roundtable Report on High Potential Leaders. My name is Colleen Jones, and I'm a senior coach here at the Roundtable, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. We're going to dig into what's really going on in the minds of your top talent and explore what that means for you as you shape your leadership development strategies for 2026. Before we dive in, just a couple of things that I'd like to share, starting with something that's very close to our hearts here at the Roundtable. So, at the Roundtable, we're deeply committed to making an impact. And as part of our ongoing commitment to reconciliation, we've partnered with Inspire, which is a national Indigenous charity that invests in the education of Indigenous youth. To honor the legacy of the 215 children whose unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, BC, we've set a goal to fund 215 university scholarships over the next 5 years. So if you'd like to, I'm forgetting that I'm the person in charge here of the slides. And so I'm just going to move to the Inspire page. And if you see Claudia's email there, if you'd like to learn more or contribute to this initiative, please feel free to reach out to Claudia at the email address you'll see on the screen for more information. And as we continue to reaffirm our dedication to supporting Indigenous communities, I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Oakville, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, part of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat peoples, and I'm grateful to live and work on this land, and I want to recognize the enduring presence Indigenous peoples across these lands. All right, so before we get started, just a quick note on how you can participate today. So while we do have everyone muted, the chat is open. And at the Roundtable, we're really all about collective impact. So don't be shy. Those of you who know us know that well. We'd love for you to share your thoughts, your reactions, and your ideas for future research in the chat. So if there's something that you're hearing Maria and Glain talk about and you are curious about something, if it triggers something for you, pop it in there. Because we're always interested in ideas for our future research. And the Q&A will be open throughout the session and we'll be monitoring that. So please feel free to chime in at any time. You don't need to wait until the end for Q&A. We'll weave in your questions as we go along. So for those of you who are new to us, the Roundtable helps organizations unleash collective impact by optimizing the passion of high potential leaders, unleashing exponential power of teams, and building high-performance cultures where people want to stay. We do this through group, team, and one-on-one coaching and building the mindsets and behaviors that matter most in your organizations. So today we're going to be exploring the world of high potentials and sharing what we learned through our research this year, looking at our Roundtable community and translating that into meaningful actions that you all can take as you plan for 2026. So leading our conversation today is I don't know. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead 2 slides. Yeah, Glain, I told you you should be in charge of this. I'm not good with multitasking. So leading our conversation today is Glain, our founder and president. That's Glain like shine, not Glain like rain. Glain is a certified executive coach, and among her many other things, she has over 30 years of experience leading teams across private, public, and not-for-profit sectors, so has deep experience as a leader herself. And joining Glain is Maria Brown from Management Research Group. MRG brings decades of research expertise and understanding what makes leaders effective. And as head of research and education, Maria is really at the heart of keeping MRG's research leading edge and trains practitioners all over the world on MRG's suite of assessments around the world. So with that, I will hand things over to Glain to take us into what we're all here to hear about today.
Oh, thank you, Colleen. And yes, we'll discuss your PowerPoint capabilities at our next one-with-one. No, I'm kidding.
Just tomorrow.
Hi, everyone. And great to see some new names, some familiar names. Amr, I love seeing you in this list. Along with every other people. I feel like I'm in what was that romper room show, right? Where the lady had the mirror and she'd see everybody and she'd call you out by name. She never called Glain, but anyway. I'm thrilled to be here with my friend and colleague, Maria Brown from MRG. And Maria, this has been a fun project to work on with you, I've got to say.
Oh yeah, it's been fun the whole way. I mean, it's fun, exciting, and insightful, as hopefully you'll see.
Yeah. So let's get into it. So what I thought I'd do is I just to kind of give it one step back. So at the Roundtable, we really do concentrate most of our efforts in high potential development. So our group programs are really driven around that, and that's who participated in this survey. So I'm going to do a very quick screen share so that you can see who we worked with and who we heard from. So in terms of the makeup of the group from a generational perspective, this makes sense, right? I mean, we've got predominantly Gen X, because again, we're working sort of that VP, senior manager through to VP level in organizations, and then millennials. And so we just see Gen Z starting to peak in a bit, and baby boomers starting to peak in a bit. But I will say most of the data is really driven around the millennial and Gen X perspective. Hey, Maria?
Yes, absolutely. And we're starting to see that shift in all our research, right? The demographics are shifting, and Gen X is really growing in those numbers. Absolutely. And yeah, Gen Z is just peaking in. I'm surprised we saw that. We are seeing a lot fewer baby boomers. Like, it's the next time we do this, it's going to be a lot less.
We might not have,
they might not be there anymore.
Well, maybe they're not high potential anymore. Baby boom, I think they're all thinking about retirement at this point, right?
Exactly.
So for us, they're kind of not on the radar as much anymore. And this you can see the breakdown of how the group broke down. So we've got 51% in that middle management to AVP kind of cohort, and then the next biggest group was that VP department head at 17%, with some executive senior leaders in at 13%. So not as many, individual contributors don't typically do as much in our programs, but certainly that really reflects kind of the folks that tend to jump into the Roundtable program. So it's all from the alumni community. Some of you on this call might have participated in the survey, and if you did, thank you for doing that, because you gave us a lot of really rich data. So Maria, want to jump in?
I was going to add, with 211 participants, we have a good amount of people to really draw some insights from this, right? It's a really large sample for this type of research. So I was really excited that we were able to get that.
Yeah, I love that you said that, actually, because I think what people don't know, often when you're seeing research about leadership, it's very general. It's everybody. So this is kind of an interesting sample that we have, because it's so concentrated in organizations that have identified this level of talent. And so now we're going to get into what is a high potential, and we'll see, it's not always, the definitions kind of vary too across different organizations and things like that. So that's what we thought we'd do first, is kind of just set the stage and talk about this word high potential leader. And what does it actually mean? Because in my experience, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So I would love you in the chat to let us know, if you're in HR, do you formally identify your high potentials? You know who they are, but you don't have a formal process. Are you here on this call going, I don't even know what a high potential means? Like, what are we talking about here? And then if you're a high potential, say, I am high potential, own it. And then we're going to tell you the definition of high potentials, and you can actually say, oh, am I? maybe I'm not as high potential as I thought I was. I sort of had a little bit of that realization as we were doing this. So throw it into the chat and let's see what's coming in. What are we seeing? I've lost my chat bar. Here we go.
There we go.
Yay. Okay, we know who they are, but we don't have a formal
I love that one.
Yeah.
I can tell that. I can tell who it is.
Yeah,
agility.
Someone who's high learning agility is for sure. We formally identify our hypos. Yeah, so a lot of people are formally identifying talent, which is great to see. Maria, as you've come across your travels, do you find that there's most companies have a formal process, or do you find that it's actually all over the place, a mixed bag?
I think it's all over the place. And even when there's a formal process, there's not necessarily consistency, right, across organizations. So it's interesting. It's reflective of what we're seeing here in the chat.
I love this. Yeah, I'm considered one. Yes, you are, Nick. I know Nick, and I'm going to endorse that considered one thing. Okay, let's go. Let's talk about really leadership, and then what separates high potentials. Because this is what I love about partnering with MRG, is that they have research for days. Well, actually, they have research for decades. So it really allows us to kind of get under the cover. But here's just a bit of a baseline for all of us. Some of you who've known me for a long time will have heard me say this before. But when we think about leadership, when we think about what's important for leaders, we really have two main expectations, right? It's like deliver results and build relationships, like period, end of, do that. And what a number of years ago now, but Zenger Folkman had done a study, and they wanted to understand, who were perceived to have the most effectiveness. Were they leaders with a goal focus? Were they leaders with a people focus? Or were they leaders that had both? So here we go. Goal focus, okay, not bad. People focus, slightly less. If you had both, this was the perceived effectiveness. So it's a huge difference, right, in terms of perceived effectiveness of leaders to be able to balance both. But what I love is that MRG did some research a little bit later on, or more recently, to support Matthew Lieberman in his book Social. And what Matthew Lieberman talked about was this idea of a neural seesaw, that when you sort of focus on the social side of your brain goes up, the kind of results orientation in your brain goes down. And so I guess he came to you folks, right, Maria, to say, how many leaders that are effective actually balance both? Do you want to just give us a quick highlight about that survey and sort of what you were trying to figure out?
Absolutely. Yeah. He reached out to us because, knowing that there's this perception of greater effectiveness when both of these things are happening within the same person, right? When the focus is shared between those two areas. How common is it, right? How often does it happen? And so we have data. We've been around for over 40 years, and we have leadership data and effectiveness data from all that whole time period. So we did go in there and we did a study initially, that one that you cite there, over 60,000 leaders. We've done it many times since then, but we looked at leaders who spend time, who focus on achievement, and who focus on accountability, right? So those two things combined are a results focus. And then we looked at a relationship focus, so connecting with other people, showing that they care for their well-being, but also cooperating and being collaborative with others as that relationship focus. And we started by looking at the top third in each, right? If you're emphasizing it at the top third, how likely is that you're doing both of those things at the top third? Mm-hmm. Well, it also, should I share the number?
Well, I was going to say, so I would love in the chat, how many leaders do you think in MRG study balanced both?
We're in the top third on both relationships and results.
Yeah, like just throw it in like percentage. Do you think it was 80%, 30%?
5%, 15, 5%, yeah.
5%. Okay.
20. Okay. So we're kind of all over the place, but that's good. That's why we do research, right? Well, so that was actually top half. When we did top third, it was less than 1%. And we were like, wait a second. So we had to rerun it. And so then we said, okay, let's just look at above average. Yeah. Top 50% on both. And that's where we got that 5.6%.
Yeah.
Right.
So isn't that amazing, right? That you even had to scrub lower to kind of figure out, or scrub higher, I guess, to figure out, okay, can we even get more people into? See, I think this is the key thing for all of us as leaders to understand, right? Mm-hmm. Like all of us need to know, where are we going to have a bias and a tendency to go one way or the other? And it really is, how do we work to bring both together, right?
And it goes against the way our brain naturally works. Yeah. And we've done different, so the initial study was English-speaking countries. We've done a bunch of different samples, and it's sometimes lower, like 3%, 4%. Wow. So it's really difficult, I guess,
it's really difficult. Both of these things. Yes. It's really difficult. So, so this is what I love. Sorry, oh my gosh, Colleen's cursed me, I think, on my slides. So here's what I love, and I'd love you to just sort of take us through this list, because you've done then research on, so to drill into this even more, right, is this research on then, okay, then these 5 potential leaders, what really differentiates them? What are the behaviors that we see differently? So I'll bring up the picture. You walk us through the highlights of what separates these folks from everybody else in your database.
Absolutely. So we have done global research on what defines a high potential. So part of the assessment asks whether someone has future potential. And so we can combine those results So, whether someone is seen as having future potential with how they behave in a different part of the assessment. And so we can make the connection between what behaviors are associated with conveying potential, with being seen as a high potential leader. And what we find is that high potential leaders are results focused, right?
Mhm.
They set high achievement goals, they stick to high, like really ambitious deadlines, they explain things clearly so people know what's expected and what the outcome should be. And they make sure that things get done, right? They hold people accountable. They connect with others. They prioritize connection, and ensuring the well-being of the people they're working with. They bring energy to interactions.
Mhm.
Sometimes that energy is contagious. They take the time to win people over, to persuade, to share their ideas in a persuasive way. Um, and they don't default to making decisions on their own, going off and kind of like, making that decision and then sharing it. They do bring people into that conversation.
Mhm.
They are strategic. They stay ahead and focus on kind of like the future consequences and the broad implications of their decisions. They don't tend to stick to the way things were done, like the traditional way of approaching things. So they're more open to trying new things and trying new ways of doing things. They remain calm under pressure, and they're likely to raise their hand and step up to lead. And then finally, this one's interesting. They low deference to authority. They don't always rely on senior leadership to tell them what to do. Like they're more likely to, if it makes sense, just go ahead and do something. And so
Mhm.
these things are really key differentiators, right? They're behaving differently, and there's a leadership kind of presence associated with this definition of high potential.
Yeah, I love in the chat. Like, are you seeing similar things with the folks as you're looking at the hypos in your group? Did these sort of resonate for you? Would love to see if there's other things that you're starting to, that you also see in your organization. Because I think culture plays a big factor too for
Mm-hmm.
people. But I think that like one of the things we've been asked to do a lot of like work around with folks lately is this whole notion of accountability. And something you
Mm-hmm.
said there that was really interesting, because one of the points we make in that is this idea that often we say we want people to be accountable, but it's a blend of initiative, and you can't take initiative if you don't have context. And I think when you string together
Mm-hmm.
some of these behaviors that hypos do so well, the reason why they're able to go off course with authority is because they are plugged in, they are connected, they are understanding the broader
Mm-hmm.
picture, so they can take that initiative,
Uh,
right? They are
mm-hmm.
understanding how the pieces fit together. So I think, when you take one and isolate it on its own and say, oh, these people, they'll be maybe the bit of the Mavericks, they'll go off and they'll do something
Mm-hmm.
even though they're Boston, but there's other things that are happening within that. It's not, this is what I also love about the work that MRG does, is it's not a behavior, it doesn't work in isolation. We have to look at these in a combination
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned accountability, right? If you don't communicate what's needed, then how are you going to hold people accountable, right? So it's that
Mm-hmm.
combination of behaviors there that make them more effective, right? This is what
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen, and here's the deadline, and then I'm going to make sure that we reach it, that we do what we said we were going to do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now here's the thing. I have said for years about high potential leaders. I just think they're wired differently. I would say, like, you know what? I just think there's a weird wiring in hypos. And because I get to work, obviously, we get to work with a lot of them. I'll often say that to them jokingly. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're the weirdo in the room. Like, you need to understand that about yourself. You're getting impatient with other people, you're frustrated by other people because you've got a lot more
Mm-hmm.
capacity or drive or whatever it is than the average
Mm-hmm.
person. And so this is what I love also about, the work that MRG does, and the richness it brings to the work that we do, is that you go below behavior, though, right, into motivation and what drives these folks.
What
So
a great intro to
yeah,
motivators.
let's
I love
talk
it.
about the motivational drivers that sit underneath this behavior. So talk to us
Absolutely.
a little bit about some of these. I'll pull up the pics and you can
Thank you,
chat
Glain. No,
with me.
absolutely. I mean, motivation is so behavior is something that we can change. Motivation is kind of who we are, right? What it is that we're drawn to, what it is that satisfies us emotionally. And so what we've seen when we study, again, global research looking at high potential leaders is that they are motivated to provide support to help others. This is something that satisfies them. So they're going to do things that allow them, that give them that opportunity, right, to provide support and help to others. They are motivated by succeeding and by achievement, right? They want to excel at what they're doing. They want to do more. Like there's kind of this battery that needs to be charged with success, with achievement, right? They appreciate external recognition, right? They're drawn to that external recognition from others, and so that combined with that need to excel and achieve can really push them to do more. They have less of a need than their peers usually to get things right. There's kind of a freedom. They're less about structure and process and getting and stability, right? So there's a freedom associated with that, as we can see with that gentleman hopping around that mountain.
Taking
And
the
then
risk, right?
exactly, and they're comfortable with risk. They're a lot more comfortable with risk than others. Which Glain, you were talking about how they're unique. It's interesting when you learn that about yourself, because you want to be mindful of that. How are you, if you're leading a team, how are you leading them? Are you maybe making them a little less comfortable because you're a little more comfortable with risk and they might be less? And then finally, they enjoy the spotlight. They like to be visible. They like to show off their talents, right? So there's something here there's connection, right? They care about people. They want visibility, but they also want to achieve. They want to be recognized for what they're doing. And that's something that's when we look at motivation, when people are motivated by something, there's not like a point where you're satisfied with it. Like they just want more and more and more. Like there's no point where you fill your cup usually with motivation.
Yeah. And I want people to really sit with this, because I think when we look at the results of the report, we're going to come back to these motivational drivers and why some of these things are just different for high potentials. Other people might feel it. Like if you just looked at the surface of the results of the report, you go, well, everybody's feeling that. No, but this is the point in here that it differentiates the inner experience for these individuals. Right. And I think you touched on that. What doesn't drive them is that stability, right? And that predictability there, there's an agility. And I love Chris's comment. They're entrepreneurs. I've said that a long time. I always feel like the hypos that I work with are so wired. That's my other book that I keep thinking about, is like Hack It Like an Entrepreneur, because I think there are things that they just are very naturally wired to do. They're very entrepreneurial, but within companies, within the company frame.
And one thing I'll add, so with the lower need for process and structure, I think they're more comfortable with done is better than perfect, right? I mean, let's keep things moving, right? There's a pace associated with that as well. But they're also more...
Which is interesting, because of the drive to achieve and to excel on things, that they're also willing, though, to, not get bogged down in perfection.
So there's kind of a balance there, right? Like hopefully a healthy balance, push and pull that keeps them moving forward. Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's get into the report stuff, because this is what we're here to talk about, right? So we did the report. We had so much data. And so what I will say to all of you is, if there's things that you're super curious about that we don't talk on tape, reach out to us, because literally we could probably find out all kinds of things for you that we just had to cut. So there's probably some tidbits that Maria and I might share that you might not see in the report, but you're here, so you're getting to hear them firsthand. Let's start with some good news from this group, and maybe not surprising news. There's super high commitment. 75% of respondents rated their commitment as 80% or higher. Maria, did that surprise you at all with this group?
It did. I mean, especially nowadays, right, where there's so ambiguity out there. The fact that it was so, it did, absolutely. I'm curious if other people who are working, or are high potentials, are surprised by that, right? Because commitment, and engagement. I mean, I was really surprised by those. And even when it's a differentiator, it's not too low, right, with the other groups. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually wasn't that surprised. I think maybe just because of the
Mm.
groups that we've worked with over the years. I mean, they are so committed and they'll be vocal and they'll be not happy about things, but they're not happy because they want it to be better. The motivation is
Hmm.
really to drive to make it better. And so I see people who are really in some, and we'll see it here in the stats, like in some tough spots, but grinding it to try and get, like to get to the other side of whatever they're facing. So for me, I would say I wasn't actually all that surprised. But what I think is interesting about this, Ben, is this is a hyper engaged group that are really committed. So it almost amplifies some of the
Hmm.
challenges they're experiencing, right? It
Hmm.
puts an amplification on it, I think, in an interesting way. So let's start with that one because this was a juicy one, I thought. So we call it the drive that fuels and drains high potential talent. So let's set up what we found out and then we'll kind of dissect it a bit.
Hmm.
So the headline to this with the hypo group really is that the risk with your hypos isn't disengagement, as we are just
Hmm.
talking about. They're there. It's actually burnout. And what we found from the group was that 45% are citing constant firefighting. And the other, and then we dug a little bit deeper into this, we found that there was different strain being experienced at different levels. So we had the VPs who were experiencing a lot of ambitious mandates from up above, and then really concerned about their ability to deliver on those because of resource constraints, headcount freezes, inability to kind of fill roles. Um, Versus managers who their biggest challenge was unclear priorities, not having, clear priorities. So Maria, let's layer into this, like, because I bet you there's people on the call that are like, everybody's feeling this stuff. What is it about this that amps it up for your high potential leader?
That's a great question. And, I'd go back to what they're doing and what motivates them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you think about high potential leaders, they're motivated by achievement, right? They're motivated to be recognized. They're motivated by this desire to help and provide support and comfort to others. So that can translate to putting a lot on themselves. When you think about, and that's just motivationally, right? So it's something that like it's just a natural response, right, to situations. Oh yeah, sure, I'll sign up for that. Yes, I'll provide support. Um, but then behaviorally, they're the ones who are raising their hands to lead. They want to be in charge. They're getting things done. They're setting these high achievement goals, and so the risk there, of course, is that can look like engagement. That can look like commitment. But how sustainable is it? Right. One thing that was interesting as because one behavior that we measure in the LEA is delegation, right?
Mm,
And they're not delegating any more than others, right? So if their tendency is to take on more than other leaders, but they're not delegating more, that's a lot for an
yes.
individual to take on themselves. And so what does that mean? Are they really pushing themselves toward burnout, right? Are they
Yeah.
increasing the strain on themselves? Uh, it's
Yeah. And
most
I,
likely.
I Yeah, no, I think it's bang on. And I think about, I was having a conversation last week with one of the CEOs of one of the companies that we work with, and we were talking about this. I was sort of giving him a bit of a preview of some
Mhm.
of the stats, and he said, Glenn, one of the things I'm really challenged by is because they're going through massive change. It's just their company is in a big whirlwind right now.
Mhm.
And he said, I know our priorities at the executive level are shifting rapidly, right? I
Mhm.
know they are. And I will say to people on my team and the key talent that he's leaning on, okay, you've got these 5 things, only do the one thing. Do this one thing. That's what I need you to do. And he said, and
Mhm.
they'll still do all 5. They'll do the one, but they still do all 5. And he said, Glenn, how do I stop people from doing that? And it was funny to me, not funny, in that I think that drive to excel, that I think what high potentials really struggle with is boundaries, because it
Mhm.
feels like, in some ways, it feels like defeat, or it feels like you're letting people down, or it feels, like there's all
Mhm.
these things that kind of wrap into that. I think also they're kind of optimistic and they think they can take on more than they actually can, is another observation. But I think it's a conundrum for managers because because they're a little bit like ducks on the water where the legs are going like this underneath, but you might see that calmness and that, like, wow, they've got so much capacity, but they're not seeing the strain that goes underneath. And these people who are not seeing their kids at night, they're not doing all of the things outside of their work, they're not exercising, they're not taking care of themselves. That's the pathway, right, to burnout. And what I said to him was, I said, I think what we have to start doing with people is we have to start elevating, like create a different goal for them. The goal is not to get all of this stuff done. The goal is to demonstrate that you're capable of getting to the next level. You got to channel that excelling ambition into a different goal. So if you are wanting to move up the ladder, not being able to prioritize, not being able to take that time that it took you to do those 4 projects and actually put it into something that's a bigger bang for the buck for the business, that shows lack of discernment. That's going to show that you don't know how to prioritize. You don't know how to delegate. Why are you doing all that work? Why aren't you having? So I think that, like, for him, it's like, oh, that's a really interesting conversation. I've never had that elevated conversation with any of the folks on my team before. And I think that is one of the tricks with a hype is that, and you and I talked about this in our pre-call, is like their drive to drive. You can say you don't need to do that. But when your motivational energy is like, oh, I want to get this done, it's hard to put the brakes on.
Yeah. No, and with that excelling energy, that wanting to achieve more, by letting them know what truly is going to look like success, right? Like that's going to help with refocusing. The other thing I wonder about is if you're wired that way and you're surrounded or you're connecting with other high potentials who are also wired that way, do you even realize this isn't this isn't healthy, right? Because everyone's kind of in the same grind, right? So how do you like help them recalibrate?
Yes.
As well as, and I think just focusing, what is your goal? This is really what you should be trying to achieve on. It's not this side thing that of course you can get it done, but is that really going to get you where you want to go?
Yeah. I think that is such a huge, so I hope everybody listening is thinking about if you're a hypo experiencing this, but also, so it's a good conversation to have with your boss. But also if you've got people on your team, right, where, maybe they're blowing your mind because they're doing so much and they're getting so much done. Okay, well, maybe, you want to sort of really figure out what's underneath that. So let's go to the next theme that we thought we'd focus on and surface, which is really this idea of clarity as the loyalty lever. I mean, we're talking about clarity of expectations, right? So what we found in the research was that when people had clear expectations, they were more engaged than those who had less clear or shifting expectations. So it's really speaking to this idea of people who want to be successful and be seen as being successful want to know where the goalposts are, right? Want to know where the goalposts are. What other, Maria, as you were thinking about this particular element of the research, is there anything else that sort of stood out for you or that struck you about this piece?
It's not surprising to me that it is clarity of expectations that can drive engagement, right? We have a group of people who are less structured. They're not, so the more that clarity can come externally, the easier it's going to be for them, right? It's just not in their nature to look for it, right? But it doesn't mean they don't appreciate it. Especially when you help that tap into some other motivators. Right.
Yeah.
So like achieving, getting recognition, and so on. So yeah, that the lower structuring, right? That lower need for establishing process and structure can sometimes it can look like someone just jumping in and figuring things out as they go. So some clarity.
Guilty
there you go.
Charged, Maria. Guilty.
I'm with you on that. I'm low structuring, and let's just jump in, right? Because I think what they might be thinking, I know from my personal experience, is I just want to get it done. I'm not going to waste time thinking about how I'm going to do it. Let's just start the work, right? And so by adding clarity, if the tendency is still to jump in, at least there's some structure coming in from the outside that'll help them get there. So I can absolutely see how they're going to be more engaged when there is clarity because they know what they're doing. The work, it's easier to engage in that work when you know what it is that you're trying to achieve.
I really do. I hadn't really sort of myself connected to thoughts between that lower structuring part, like, because structuring is all about, like, I mean, people with high structuring, they have the to-do list. They map out their calendar. Their calendar is perfect. They know where they're going to be spending this time, how much time they need. I think when you're lower structuring, you can find yourself in that firefighting mode very quickly. And if I think about, the jumping in, the sort of very spontaneous desire to, like, okay, let's go, let's help, let's make this happen, it really can become a piece. So I think that's, like, there is something, again, as manager, if you've got folks on your team and you're trying to, like, okay, how do I make sure they're not burning out? I think it is that sort of forcing them to slow down and really think through, and being a bit of that maybe devil's advocate to say, okay, what are you going to take off your plate if you are going to take this on? What are the things that you're going to say no to, which it's a conversation that often doesn't happen enough. And I think what I see is, once expectations get set in the mind of a very driven, performance-oriented person who doesn't want to let people down, they have a hard time getting off that runaway train. So, all right, let's keep going with the third theme, which was growth through conversations, not content. So what we found that made one of the biggest impacts in terms of people's engagement was high quality career conversations. I would love in the chat, what would you consider to be a high quality career conversation? What does that look like? And bonus question, do you think your managers are well equipped to have them? Right? Do you think your managers are well equipped to have them? Because here was the stat. We saw that it boosted engagement. So 88% of the folks that were having those conversations were more engaged than others. So would love to kind of hear your thoughts in this quality career conversation. Maria, again, like, let's put the motivational lens on this. Why is the high quality career conversation critical for this gang of people?
I think I would say the structuring is part of it. Behaviorally, the lower deference to authority somehow, I mean, they're not going to check in with more senior leaders about what's expected, right? Like what that path looks like. And so how do senior leaders or managers share that with them, right? So I guess some question, like, where does this initiate, right? The high quality career conversations. Just kind of a question I have, right? Would it emerge from the high potential leader? Should they be the one seeking it out, or is it something that should come from above, right? From their manager, help bringing up the conversation to really help them know what the path is, right? So yeah.
I think it's hard, candidly, as a manager myself, I would say it's really hard for managers to have career conversations. And with high potentials, I think it's even harder, because you have this person on your team that is, if you go by, the Pareto rule, like they drive 80% of the progress that you're making, really. And they are, the top 20% of your team, 80% of the progress. And they come to you and they go, hey, Maria, I'm getting a little bored. I'm kind of, I wish I could have more. And there's nowhere to move them right now. You don't have to think for them right now. And you just need them to stay where they are. And years ago, I learned this model called the career doom loop, where the stage in the career doom loop, that when a hypo gets to it, it's trouble, is when they get to that point where they're in a job that they no longer love, but they're good at it. And that is very tricky. And, and to keep people engaged, you got to move them to the stage of, I'm in a job that I love, but I'm not good at it yet. Like, I'm on that growth curve. I'm learning something new. And because what I know, a high potential is never going to go to the fourth stage of the doom loop, which is, I'm in a job that I don't love and I'm no longer good at it. They're going to exit. They will exit. And so we have to really, I think, help managers have that. But I also think, is it the manager the best person to be having those conversations? I remember years ago hearing a company that actually managers did not have the career conversations. It was another individual in the organization that the person was paired with. So it could be more neutral. It could be more, less about, okay, do not quit on me, and more like, okay, what can we do within the company that we could get you into? Because the other thing I find too is, a lot of managers are pretty myopic about their own department. So they go, oh, I don't have a role for you here. They're not being advocates to look outside to see what else could I be moving you to. And the cost of recruiting talent is ridiculous. So why aren't we thinking more about how we move talent around? So that's my rant on why I think we don't, like, managers. It's a tough job for us, period. Like, believe me, I'll try and talk you into staying if I love you. Believe me. But is that right? And is that ultimately going to keep you motivationally you're ready to go?
Yeah.
Right. That's the reality.
Yeah. I'm
right?
wondering if there's something there with tapping into gaining stature, like recognizing what they are achieving, where they are, making sure that's broadly visible, but also tapping into that motivation to help and support, right? As see if you can stretch that a little bit more, right? So that moving up to the next level, maybe can sit there for a little bit because all these other motivators are being satisfied, are being fulfilled, right? Providing support.
Totally. And I think the thing about when you're in that stage of that doom loop of I'm in a job that I don't like, but I'm good at it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need a new job to get to the stage of I'm not good at it. You could be on a project. You could be given some expanded responsibility. There's lots of different ways to get at that, right? And I think that's what we have to really be thinking about is how are we really engaging that, curiosity that these people have and drive to want to continuously learn and grow as well. So the flip to this, what we found in the research was that, so they want these career conversations, but 30% find it hard to prioritize their own development. And then the HR leaders that we surveyed as part of this are worried about being able to provide sufficient growth opportunities. So we've kind of got this, tension. And, what I think what we talked about a little bit is that, the inability, the finding it difficult to prioritize their own development is a bit of this double-edged sword that they have, right, around prioritizing helping others, right, and getting results done so that they'll sacrifice, just like they sacrifice, their family time or their health or whatever, they're sacrificing their own development because they're so focused on helping everybody else or getting the result.
And they're firefighting, right? So how do you even know, how do you even fit it in, right? It just it becomes deprioritized because these other things are more motivating. Absolutely.
And I think you did some really interesting research that I'll bring up, which was really around the shifts that people go through as well when they move from leadership level to leadership level. Because I think this is also something that we really need to kind of pay attention to, right? So let's talk about that. Because with hypos, we promote them and we go, off you go, because you were amazing.
Yeah, they're the people you're promoting, right? Because they're the high potential leaders, right? And there's this kind of assumption sometimes that effectiveness is going to travel with that individual. So what we did here was we looked at effective leaders at one level and effective leaders at the next level. And then we compared what they were doing to see how much of a lift is it to continue to be effective when you are promoted or transitioning to the next level. And as you can see here, there's a lot of change required. So we measured 22 behaviors at that first individual contributor to first line manager. 4 of those need to shift, then 9, then 13, right? A lot is having to shift as people move up. And there are 2 ways that this is not addressed. I don't think leaders who are being promoted know that this is required, right? That time for developmental work is going to be necessary, and they need to make time for that, right? And the amount of change, right? I was fine when I moved up to middle manager. I'll be fine when I move up to executive. No, I mean, sure, you might be, but it's going to require a little bit more work, right? So there's something about preparing the people around them to have realistic expectations and to give them, to push them to devote that time to development is absolutely essential. Like I think about it, the way to succeed through a transition is not necessarily how successful you were before, but how agile you are about change and how you can adapt. And what goes around that is time to develop, time to work on that, on those shifts.
Yeah, 100%. And because, in our programs, we engage the manager. And one of the things we do in all of the work we do is this alignment meeting where we get them to look at the MRG 22 behaviors and define what is going to be important for this individual in this role at this time, right? Given the context, given the situation, given, their development needs. And I'm always amazed at the end of those meetings, the participant will always say, I've never heard that before. I've never heard that before. Because I think behavior, this is the other thing, right? Managers are not great about giving behavioral coaching and feedback. They don't know how to break it down. And I think because we also live in our own biases, a lot of stuff we go, well, isn't that just common sense? Like, shouldn't people just know to be doing that? Yeah. And so that it's sort of pulling together these pieces around clarity, really being clear on expectations. And then do you recognize just how much work it's going to take? I love that what you said, like what success doesn't carry with the leader, right? However you said that was just so perfect. I'm like, that's it. We need to also help people know how to adjust situationally.
Yeah. And you brought up context, just a quick thing. What your manager is doing at another level may not be what you need to be doing as a leader at your level, right? So it really needs to be coached based on what is expected of that newly promoted leader, not on what your current definition is as a manager at whatever higher level. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Theme 4, flexibility fuels performance.
So much coverage. This is great. I love it.
So here we had location. So we found that people who are working fully remotely had higher job engagement than people who were hybrid or in office. So 10% gap. What would you say is a bit of the underlying thing for high potentials around that stat? Because we've got a lot of return to office mandates happening right now.
Yeah, no, this totally surprised me, I'll be honest. But then I looked at, what we know about high potentials. And when you think about their lower structuring, more comfortable with less stable environments, right? With more surprises. It feels like it's a good fit for remote work. So based on that, I can see why job engagement for remote workers would be higher. They also have motivational factors that help them be successful there, right? So they're going to spend more time connecting with others, which is something you may have to put more effort into when you're working remotely, right? They communicate clearly when we look at behaviors, right? They ensure that what they're saying is understood, right? So they do a lot of things, and they have a lot of more intrinsic motivational drivers that do make them fit for that remote work, that make that really work for them. It doesn't mean that's the only place that they can work, but I can see why there's a fit there. Absolutely.
I think too, the other thing I've been thinking about with this too is I think it's also reflective of the Gen X population in this and any older millennial, because if you're also at that stage of life where you've got younger kids and you want that flexibility and you want all of that, yes, and you're delivering results. I think there's also, we were laughing about this a little bit when we were on our pre-call, was I do also think, that gaining stature piece of like, I can be relied on. Like, you don't need to babysit me and tell me where to do my work. I feel like with some of the people that I've talked to where that's come in, they're almost insulted that you are now telling me I have to be in the office to drive results. So again, absolutely, small segment of the population. Organizations have to look at things more broadly. I was having dinner last night with a friend of mine who has really big scope, and they're pulling everybody back in the office. She goes, we have to. It's like, because I get that population can do it, but the majority can't, right? But how do you create flexibility for this group, I think, is the thing to, think about. And I know it's hard when it's being mandated. And then the last thing,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we've been talking about clarity. There is a challenge there with ensuring that they are connected, that they know what they need. So that clarity that we talked about before is still present, even if they are working remotely and you have that larger distance between them and others in the organization.
Yeah, I think it's the intentionality too of knowing you need to bring people together. Like you need to really be intentional about that. Okay, this wouldn't be a presentation in 2025 if we didn't talk about AI. Like honestly, we had to. So there's 60%, 7% of respondents say AI is important and critical. 72% perceive that their organizational progress against it is limited, and 79% are open to AI-enabled development. So my take on this a little bit is that, for this group who want to continuously be almost like they're looking ahead, they've got that orientation, they want to be successful, they see this coming. So they want to be in the loop on how to utilize it. And we did find Gen X, interestingly, was more open, like earlier adopters than the millennial group on this. But what was your take on this from a engagement perspective and why they're open to AI?
No, I mean, I think they're open to trying new things. They're open to not necessarily following, sticking with the status quo, right? So I think high potentials are really the kind of people who you would want to start trying AI. They're comfortable with it. They like to stay up to date with specialized knowledge. So if this becomes part of what they're known for and what they have to do for work, I can see them as being the kind of people who will, stay up to date and keep. I mean, AI evolves very quickly, right? So they'll know how to use it and make sure that they do. And they're lower structuring, right? Jump in, let's see how this goes,
Yeah,
right? I don't need to take a course. I'm just going to jump right in and start, seeing what it does. But it's interesting how there is this gap between their readiness, their willingness to try it and interest in it. And then, of course, also perception of progress being limited by organizations. Like, is this a source of frustration for them?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because
how does that play out?
I think there's almost a bit of a FOMO driver here. There's a little bit of I don't want to be left behind. I want to make sure that I'm, seen as somebody who's got what it takes to thrive in this next evolution of the world of work, whatever that looks like. Okay, so let's bring it all together. So, I mean, one of the things that when we think about what's going on, it is sort of indicating the system under strain, right? So all of these things that we've been talking about, there's a lot of external volatility right now. It's creating a lack of clarity, right, in organizations, which is creating unrelenting demands on everybody. But because the hypos are the ones jumping in and taking it on and taking more maybe of their share, it's creating that additional pressure on them. The talent gaps are adding to this. And then we've got this firefighting that's happening by default. And it's like this spinning cycle for a lot of organizations right now. So we didn't want to leave you like on a low. We wanted to kind of give you some thoughts to sort of move to some actions on. So prioritizing career support is a big one. How can you make growth unavoidable? How can you build ongoing feedback and dialogue, like moments, right? Moments, not once a year or once a quarter, or how can you think of, career conversations in an ongoing way? And how can we equip our managers to be better at it? Maria, any sort of additional thoughts for you on this that you'd layer into these two tips for people?
No, I think what you said there about turning it into an ongoing conversation, it makes it less of a big deal. Like, oh, I need to prepare for this conversation, but how do you build it into one-on-ones? Just a quick check-in, or and ensuring that there's clarity and progress, right, in a way that's satisfactory or fulfilling to that person. And I think practice makes perfect or better, right? So as managers practice this more, right, because it's happening more frequently, they're going to be better at those coaching conversations.
Totally. The other, how would you get ahead of burnout, right? So one, how can you protect some flexibility and autonomy for these folks? And the other we thought about was how can you pulse early, act quickly, and narrow the focus? So this is really about this very much checking in, helping reprioritize these low structure people who drive to achieve. how can you make sure that they are working on the right things, but also that you're giving them a bigger goal so they're not mired in that need to push everything off their plate.
Yeah.
Is a couple of the suggestions there. Any
And I
adds
think
on
in
that, Maria?
modeling, right? Modeling
Modeling.
that approach. So
Yeah.
it's seen as something that you can actually do within the organization. It's not just special
It's not
treatment for
just
the
like a
hippo.
nice
Yeah.
to have, right? And
Yeah.
then the last two that we are throwing out there is one, build better balance for them, balance between that results and people. Like, how do you build that situational capability? As Maria talked about, those different behaviors that are required at different stages. How are we supporting people through those? And how are we strengthening teams? Like, how do we make sure that this leader is not trying to go it alone, but that we really start to build out collective awareness and leadership within groups and teams so that we can disperse the load a little bit, right? Disperse the load.
Yeah.
So that's it for us. We got 3 minutes left, so I think I'm supposed to turn it back over to Colleen right now. But Maria, this was so much fun, and everybody, Maria we'd asked her as we were going along. We got curious about how have hypos changed over the years and what we look for in hypos? And so Maria's actually done a bit of digging in their, minds of Mordor over there. And so I think we're going to have Maria back in the new year, and we're going to start to look at that a little bit because there's some really interesting things that she started to pull up. And we want to talk about Gen Z because I think they're going to be a bit of a game changer. So Maria, thank you for being with us. Colleen, I'll turn it back
Thank you for
over
the
to
opportunity.
you.
I've enjoyed it so much. You have no idea. Okay.
Thanks, Glenn. Do you want to keep moving along the slides?
Yes, I will do the slides for you. How's that?
Yeah, we've learned that that's a better way to go. So, everyone, you will be receiving the Roundtable Report, this year's 2026 version, in your inbox later today. So check it out. There's lots more data that we uncovered that we didn't get a chance to share today. So check that out for sure. And join us next time. Glenn will be having a conversation with John Rosenberg on December 11th, featuring his new book, A Guide to Thriving. It's coming out later this month, so you can be one of the first to hear about it at that session on December 11th.
Can I do it? Can I do just an extra plug on that? Because I can see we've got 2 minutes. But couple of things, like John, I would say, is a recovering high potential. His book is really terrific for helping you think through the mindset and belief system you do have around what success actually is. And John's a graduate of the Roundtable program. So I am always amazed to see where our graduates go and what they end up doing and the paths they end up on. So I'm super excited for that conversation. It's going to be a really great one. So there's my extra plug for John.
Awesome.
Sorry, Colleen, back to you.
No, great addition. And stay in touch with us. So you can follow us on all of our channels. We're on LinkedIn, and all the other places. And you can reach out to Glain. Her email address is there. And that's where you'll find all the details on how to register for that webinar. So please join us next time. Thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you.